is up, Theology nerds? This is Tripp, and you're listening to Homebrewed Christianity, where since the year of 2008, we've been bringing you ideological goodness, interviews with scholars from many disciplines, all helping you get that wisdom from the ivory tower right into your earbuds so you can think, reflect, and wrestle with the biggest questions of faith and life. And today on the podcast, returning is friend of the pod, scholar of American religion, Diana Butler Bass. Oh yeah, that's right. And guess what? We had ourselves some fun. And this is a little test, you could even say. This is an episode of us testing something we've been discussing doing, having regular get-togethers once a month, where we talk about religion and politics and culture as two super nerd, progressive Christian friends. And that's what happens. We talk about a host of different topics. We wrestle with the question of exactly what is a progressive Christian, the legacy of Thich Nhat Hanh, particularly for American religion and how it shaped our conversations around religious pluralism. We look at the crazy use of religious data in the Virginia gubernatorial election and what that means for the future. We have some sarcastic asides about the recent Vanity Fair post on Jerry Falwell Jr. And a few other things, but we got all the way to the end and then realized we didn't tell anyone what we're doing for Lent. That's right. Over Lent. This year, in the year 2022, Diana Butler Bass and I are doing an online class together called Jesus D/Constructed, JesusDeconstructed.com. It's an open online class available to any and all at whatever kind of donation you want to give, including zero. See, we both wrote Jesus books. I've written 2 of them, and a lot of people have been wrestling with their relationship to Jesus when you got tons of religious baggage and you got lots of questions and pain and hurt connected to the church. Then what do you do with Jesus? Well, that's what we're going to do. So I forgot the entire time we were streaming to mention it. So go check out JesusDeconstructed.com and you'll hear about the class we are working on and inviting you to. But the main thing I want to let you know is that this was our test run. It's something we want to do monthly. We want to have sessions called Ruining Dinner, where we talk about religion, politics, culture from a progressive Christian view. And our plan is to open it up to all of our peeps, our members, the live Zoom stream, that is. We'll open it up to people that are part of Diana Butler Bass's newsletter, The Cottage, which I'll put links for here, because if you're not on it, you should totally check it out. And then, of course, members of the Homebrewed community, those excellent people that went to homebrewedcommunity.com and joined up. So our plan is to do this kind of podcast and then invite our peeps, our friends that are connected to us, supporting us and such online to join it, sending questions, topics, and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's what we're doing. This is a test. If you have ideas and suggestions for it, you should reach out and let us know because that's what we're hoping to do with this session, is to get some input, get some ideas back. All right? Anyway, Diana Butler Bass, super awesome. Freeing Jesus, her most recent book, is about to come out in paperback, conveniently for the time of the Jesus Deconstructed class. So check it out. And make sure, if you're not already on the Cottage, to get on it. All righty, here we go. Me, Diana Butler Bass, ruining your dinner. Gulp.
Press.
Hello, everyone. This is Tripp, and I am here with my friend Diana Butler Bass, and we are going to ruin your dinner. That's right.
And I'm Diana, and I'm here with Tripp, and we're good at ruining dinner.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Because you know what makes people in America more awkward than anything these days? Talking about religion, politics, and culture with like declarative sentences about your deepest convictions. Then if you happen to occupy a religious space that's also deeply Christian and progressive, not always ideal. So Diana and I were like, well, what if we save our loved ones some of our hot takes at dinner and have it together on the internet?
And I think that's a great idea, because one of the things I've been recently listening to quite a bit, and I don't know if anybody else here is kind of this geeky, but I love the Bulwark, which is this conservative group of people who are never Trumpers. Mm-hmm. And they love talking about politics and what's going on globally, but also, specifically stuff in America. And they have a couple of really great podcasts, and they talk just as friends, sitting around chatting about politics. Sometimes religion comes up.
Yeah.
And they're just relaxed about it, and they have a lot of fun. And so I thought, they're the Bulwark, from a never Trump kind of still conservative perspective.
Mm-hmm.
They need somebody to give them a run for their money.
Well, in that case,
since this is free, I figure it'll be a real run for their money.
Yeah, that's the best. Inflation will not impact. Plus, the Bulwark, isn't that like David French? He's part of that, right? David French?
I don't think he's part of it. Bill Kristol and Charlie Sykes. And there's this one fantastic woman whose name I forget, but they're all really smart and really good. And it's weird because here I am listening to people who in the 90s or in the aughts in the Bush administration, I just want to throttle all of them. And now they're like, oh, please tell me more. And I think one of the reasons I like them is because they're not afraid to talk about politics from a really personal perspective. And they're not afraid to put politics and religion together. And they're not nearly as polite as most Democrats are.
Yeah. So I think we should attempt to be polite and fun. Also the other important thing, we're going to show you what happens when Diana and I get on a call planning something. And then the first hour and a half of our call is us discussing religion, politics, and culture. Because we're like, okay, we know we have enough shared convictions. We don't have to do the preface and locate myself thing. We just get to process it. And here's what I've discovered, people. This is me helping you out. When Diana said the Bulwark are like good, smart, and fun, Diana's good, smart, and fun. I, mediocre most of the time, unless it's a select number of topics, many of which we're not going to talk about here. So I'm going to attempt to be point guard. Not my normal move on a podcast, a homebrewed Christianity. My questions could be 20 minutes. Our answers even longer. And I'm the one interviewing. So we are attempting a new format for both of us. I'm going to try to have the conversations with Diana I like having for fun, but with you in ways that everyone gets to overhear, two friends having fun that are super nerds. So what happens when a PhD in philosophy of religion and church history get together to talk about religion, politics, and culture? That's what's going to happen. So we've got a stack of topics, which in our Twitter DMs back and forth grew in the last few days. And there are a number that we haven't added that I know we're going to want to talk about. So I'm going to, at least at the beginning of this conversation, set a timer because I think that could be fun. And when our time runs out, I'm going to hit one of these buttons. Now, I know which two are long, but what if
you're kidding. Okay.
Here we go. You said you want to make sure we if we aim for an hour, it won't go over 75 minutes. And I'm not starting time until we actually start. You know, Diane, that's like I like long intros. I like long intros. But because it's religion, culture, politics, and such. Also, there's a conversation in the chat about passwords, and I don't know what I don't know what the password is.
I think that she just got it.
Okay,
from
excellent.
Catherine just got it from Stephanie.
Excellent. Look at that, friends helping friends. But if you're in the chat and there's a question, use the chat to hang out with each other. Questions put in the Q&A box if you're on the Zoom. So that way, I don't have to pay attention to every chat, and y'all can make fun of us. So there you go. And if you leave comments, like next time, think about this. That's great, because I can look at the chats later. All right, so here's the first topic, Diana.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I feel like it's real exciting with that music in the background. That when we said we wanted to have a podcast that was definitively Christian and progressive, talking about contemporary topics, I got messages from some of the Homebrewed members. They were like, yeah, but could y'all at least give us a definition of progressive Christian that you both could agree on? I'm not asking you to get all progressive Christians to agree on it, but at least you two. Like, so when you hear that, what's your like shorthand definition when someone goes, so you're a progressive Christian?
Oh my gosh. I freak out when I hear it. Wikipedia says I'm a progressive Christian, and I go, okay, I guess it must be true. But I think that the way I see it with the title is there are people who belong to the sort of the longer tradition of mostly liberal Protestantism and social justice Catholicism. And now we refer to that kind of cluster of people as progressive Christians. And, so progressive means we're open, we're thinking about things in different ways. We're not dogmatic about sort of the boundaries of orthodoxy, or that you have to have a particular sort of hermeneutical approach for scripture. And that we tend to be socially left to really far left. So that's kind of how I see it. And I think that's inclusive enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like it's one of those terms, like depending on what context, right, you're asking it in. When I was a minister on the East Coast and in Los Angeles, and people use the word progressive, I came up with a definition just from parents calling to ask questions to find out if their teenager or college kid should go to your group, right? Like they were like,
there you go. That's
like,
great.
Do you like Jesus? Do you welcome everyone? Do you not want to kill the planet and think we should care about justice?
Cool.
And you're like, yeah. And they're like, all right, I'm not really religious, but they are. So I'm going to send them your way. Young Life creeped them out. Right? Like that is like the pragmatic definition of progressive that I came up with, just being the one that filled calls from a UCC church when they were checking. Like when I'm answering our kind of much more conservative Christian friends that are in the academy asking, I tend to go like, the broad liberal Protestant tradition was like including the recognition, experience, and situation is important for theological reflection and engagement with historical criticism when it goes to the Bible, scientific reflection and stuff in deep ways. And
that's the old liberal tradition.
Yeah. And progressive.
And that was found in both Protestantism and Catholicism.
Yeah. And progressive are in the West are theologians that come out of the method of liberal theology that take seriously the critiques from the margins. And that requires a different kind of a priori commitment. So that was like my nerd one, but I don't know. But I feel like I liked yours and mine was a little, vague. So
wordy.
Yeah, I know, but
no, I like yours around questions. This is actually a good question because I think that progressivism in some ways changes where you are geographically, and it certainly changes over time. Because I remember back, I'd say around the year 2000 or so. Basically, the definition of progressive was if you're a Christian and you like gay people. It was really straightforward. Or if you're a Christian and you think men and women are equal, I mean, it was basic, really, really basic stuff like that. So, now I think that kind of is a bigger field. It's like the questions have changed some. But one of the things I really like about what you just said, and I never thought about this about you and me, Tripp, but I grew up on the East Coast. I grew up in Maryland. We moved to the West, moved to Arizona. And then I grew up partly in California too. And then I wandered all over and landed in Virginia. And you have those experiences too, of being kind of in the mid-Atlantic, North Carolina, which is, sort of Southern too, and mid-Atlantic is both. And then you went to California. And so both of you and I kind of get that when you talk about being a progressive, say on the West Coast of Canada and the United States, you're talking about something that's really kind of different than when you're talking about Virginia and North Carolina. But I've always tried to sort of bring those together, because once in a while my California friends will say, oh my gosh, you people in Virginia, that's not that progressive. And I'll say, well, it's Southern progressive. And, that's a tradition too. And it's a little different than California's understanding of progressive, but somehow we're sort of in this together. We're trying to widen the boundaries, set a bigger table, all of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really important. And my timer just went off, so I'm going to... Oh, I hit that music again. And... Okay, so the first topic I think it would be perfect is... One, people in our tribe this past week or so have been celebrating the influence of Thich Nhat Hanh. And
yes.
If you follow religion people online, one of the ways you can spot one tribe are the ones that were genuinely sad and are moved because he played such an important role in really his impact on mainline Protestantism and kind of the more progressive Jesuit-y Catholicism, because as a Buddhist contemplative, he spent lots of time engaging Jewish and Christian contemplatives, and Living Buddha, Living Christ is one of it. I bet there are about as many mainline Protestants that read that as Meeting Jesus Again for the First Time by Marcus Borg, right? It was. And so when maybe you can say a bit about taking a step back and going, how in your time observing American religion has our conversation around pluralism changed, and the unique role that his own effort contribution in writing has played?
Gosh, I didn't know you were going to turn it into a doctoral seminar. It's like, oh my goodness gracious. This has been part, I think, of what liberal or progressive Christianity has been about for a while. If you think about going back to even the 1890s, when you get the beginning of the world's parliament of religions, one of the superstars of the first world parliament of religion was the Hindu monk who introduced yoga to the United States. And there was, I think, 100 and some odd years ago, a level of sort of appropriation, but there's also been a sort of fascination that liberal Protestantism has had with Eastern ways of conceptualizing God and spirituality. And we've always been more playful with that than more conservative Christians who tend to think that it's of the devil. So going back at least, 125 or so years, that's just been part of our tradition, is to be willing to be open to hearing those voices. And then to be able to say, hey, that's an interesting practice. I wonder if a practice like that might work in our tradition, or I wonder what our tradition has that's a similar kind of practice. And so that's been there for a while. But then in this, the 60s, that just got a lot stronger with huge amounts of experimentation with Eastern religion among liberal Christians. And it's a softer sort of edge of that, I think, in the last generation with both the Dalai Lama and with Thich Nhat Hanh, where people are just a little bit like, let's not appropriate, but let's listen to and let's learn from, and, let's be in conversation with. And so, yeah, lots of us have learned tons about meditation from various Buddhist thinkers that have influenced us. And his writing was just lovely. I have a couple of little books by him that sit on my bedside table, and I just sort of pick them up once in a while when I think, I wonder what Thich Nhat Hanh says about, this. And I was rereading just a number of beautiful quotes of his about living in the present moment this week. And that's as important to me as any sort of larger meditative practice, is that the capacity that he had to really focus us and bring us right here, right now, and to value that, to know that that's where everything starts, is being able to live in the present.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's fascinating what he was able to do on a page, because I mean, if you go watch some YouTubes and
short books,
short books that are dense, but they're not painful to read. You know what I mean? Like like when he was able to write in ways that communicated a depth that you knew you didn't know yet, but you wanted to, and it was inviting. And not many writers are good at doing that. And okay, so I thought of for theological things that were really interesting to me about him. I'll state them as theses. You could pick any of them you find interesting, because we're trying to be brief. You know, the things that would be important to think about, like the gifts that Thich Nhat Hanh has demonstrated publicly for progressive Christians. One is that the Western Protestant commitment to privileging rational discourse and external linguistic symbolic representations as the best way to explain what it is that really matters to you isn't nearly as persuasive as like praxis. Thich Nhat Hanh.
Is that one thesis?
Yeah, that Thich Nhat Hanh invites us to move past thinking that proper interreligious dialogue happens at the level of ideas, because he showed up and practiced his faith and invite us to taste his faith at the terms of praxis, as opposed to what any world religions class that's been shaped by Western thought does. Like, oh, here are the Four Noble Truths. You know, like they do that. Second one is he modeled to large numbers of mainline Protestant Christians and liberal Christians that were more interested in what he was doing, that you can have a non-competitive relationship with religious traditions. He sought out Western religious traditions as a deeply committed Buddhist to engage them. And that's something we all still have to learn, because our DNA in Christianity connected to Western imperialism still has that in it. Third, he shows that you can hold something, you can hold your religious tradition and be mutually transformed by another.
Yeah.
And so
this kind of Panikar too, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Talking about a Christian doing the same thing is that
exactly.
The Catholic theologian Panikar. He kind of did some of the same kind of stuff, really.
Oh, yeah. And Panikar like points it out. He in his kind of Christological reflections. Sorry, people don't know who he is. I'm trying to be short, but he points out that if you develop a cosmic Christology, that say like Richard Rohr in that tradition, it does that. It's not that hard to recognize that religious traditions that haven't met each other are actually family members of the one cosmic source of existence and love. And that when you get to hear a conversation that's been going on between the one that knows you, made you, and loves you completely, there's something to learn and benefit from it, right? And I think like maybe that really sets up the last point, is that he is one of the examples that the horizon of the church's mission has to move beyond collapsing the horizon of history and culture into Christendom. Because Correct. All the people that have been blessed, say, by listening and learning from him, I know I've taught Living Buddha, Living Christ, and students are like, I've never felt closer to Jesus, and I learned it from him. That means that so much of the rhetoric and thinking within our traditions is that the horizon of Christendom matches the horizon of the cosmos. Once you separate the two, you can be, I mean, at least for me, distinctly, vibrantly, and deeply committed as a Christian, and not think that the kind of colonial imperialist horizon of the West matches my faith. Like, you can make a distinction, and he demonstrates that in beautiful ways.
Yeah, I think so too. It's interesting you brought up Richard Rohr, because I think in some ways one of the most compelling parts of the Richard Rohr's book, Universal Christ, is when Richard talks about how the Christ existed before 2,000 years ago. And just when you're saying that, it's like so much Christian language and so much of the Christian vision of history and time and everything else is just wrapped up in these 2,000 years. And you have to wonder how much that's had an impact on, how we understand creation and how we understand other world religions. So anyway, yeah, I think that those are all really good points to draw out of it. I think Deborah on the Q&A here on over on the Zoom page, she said, isn't it interesting that you can be a Christian and still be a Buddhist, but you can't be a Buddhist and still be Christian? So what's the mixture of those two? Can people really put them together is sort of what she's reaching at. And what there was a couple years ago, now I'm showing my age, it was probably about a dozen years ago, a guy who I knew who got elected to be an Episcopal bishop. And he was also a practitioner, a really skilled practitioner of Buddhist meditation. And the Episcopal Church wouldn't approve him.
Really?
And that was really shocking.
Yeah, they should be better Episcopalians. How many Episcopalians do you know that at least don't lie about the fact they like practicing contemplative practice? They at least fake it, right? That's like a Baptist that says they don't read the Bible at night.
They always say it has to be Christian, or whatever. And that he was willing to talk about the Buddhist sort of mix and the way that wisdom had come in and impacted his faith. And there was just a group of people in the Episcopal Church who were so outraged by this, that a bishop would have borrowed from Buddhism, that they wouldn't approve his consecration. And so it wasn't every Episcopalian. The church has to vote on every bishop who gets put before they go into office. And so he just couldn't get enough of the confirmation vote because of his willingness to say how much he'd been impacted by Buddhism and that he thought that Buddhism was true. And so there was, like I said, this grouchy group of people who said, no, you can't have a bishop. A bishop is supposed to guard the doctrine.
Well,
and so that was like, really? Are we really still talking about this after all these years? So
I guess so.
We were.
I'm not going to lose any sleep about it, Diana, if you were wondering.
Oh, good. You're a Baptist.
I would just say the question around the relationship between the two is fascinating. John Cobb, who a process theologian, Methodist, missionary kid who grew up in Japan, who was one of the first to publish on East-West dialogue, religious dialogue, he's pointed out that it is harder for a Buddhist then to become a Christian versus a Christian to include Buddhism. It's not unfounded, but part of it, I think, is the Western religious distinction to subsume whatever is happening in another religious tradition, and it focuses on into our concept of salvation. So if the concept of enlightenment is then to be equated with salvation, then it creates different tensions than for process people for a lot of reasons we don't have to go into. There are multiple ultimates, and salvation and enlightenment are distinct. But that question she asked is so important because it actually leads you to ask big questions about how you understand reality. And the tasks of different religious tradition push to the fore, right? Caring about justice and material existence and it corresponding to God's character is a different question than organizing one's own reality to what you experience as self and what you experience as pain as not being determinative, and then recognizing one's identity in relationship to the whole. Those are different tasks. And if we try to amalgamate them for religion nerds, John Hicks style, it actually ends up problematizing, I think, a lot of the unique insights of each. And Thich Nhat Hanh was beautiful because he actually insisted about the distinctions. It's because we recognize the distinctions of religious traditions that you can have fruitful dialogue, not say everyone's all going up the same mountain and going to the same place. But
yeah, I think that's really important. And Brian in the Q&A again, he's following up on some of this with the questions, and I think he makes a really important point about trends. And this is a good conversation because there are more and more people throughout the Western world who have multi-faith identities.
Exactly.
Right now. And so in the same way, I don't know if it's Canada, there's some Western country where you can check like biracial or multiracial for your ethnicity, for your race. But you can also check bi or multi-religious. And there has been talk for several years in different circles about the United States adding that into census data, which would be fascinating. Because lots of people, on my street, you go down my street, you have Hindu Catholics, and you have Jewish Methodists, and all kinds of folks, and you don't have to necessarily. I mean, there are people on my street who were born into multiple religious traditions and are trying to hold that as part of their identity, which is one of the things you're saying. But we should move on to the next, whatever our next topic is.
Look.
But Thich Nhat Hanh is great. You didn't tell me where to start with him, but that's fantastic.
Well, I just made a list of all the things on our Twitter DMs, and then I was like, well, this seems like a nice one to start with because, the one I was most pumped about, but it seemed like it would be a little aggressive for the first one. I want you to talk about your new governor. Now, and here's my preface statement to everyone that's listening. I'm in Scotland. A lot of it's been locked down. We have some children who are currently quarantining. So I'm back like in complete lockdown, supervising homeschooling. So here, I don't get updates apart from social media of America. So when I get the chance to get Diana on Zoom, I'm always like, well, how's it going? Blah, blah, blah. And then Virginia, new governor. I'm like, whoa, it looks like it's getting a little intense. So I bring it up. Little did I know, small lecture from Diana blew my mind earlier this week. So last time you told me about a lot of the way religious research data got utilized in this context, and having you told me that and heard on podcasts, on news, like what's going on in Virginia come up, no one's mentioned it. So that's my preface statement, is just that what you're about to share, everyone, you should notice this, because this is a way religion plays a really important role in moving votes around. And I was like, oh my God. But I didn't want to do that first because I was a little bit depressed after you explained it to me, knowing that all that data, I was like, so is this just a few counties? Or is it just Virginia? And you're like, nah, it's all of America. And then I said, we're about to have elections in a year and this is not good. That's what went through my head. So tell us a story, and I will try not to cry while you do it, because it was painful the first time. Yeah,
there was this little story, and I had it confirmed through a couple of personal sources. So I'm confident of its veracity, and it relates to something that's really super nerdy. Public Religion Research Incorporated has a database on their webpage, and Public Religion is a nonpartisan research organization, but it has had over its history a lot of people involved in it who are pretty progressive, but they try to bracket that out because what they think is just great data tells the story. And if you have great data and great questions and people who know how to interpret it, you're going to go a lot further understanding religion and the way religion functions in politics. So they created this thing that is this American values map, where you go in and you can punch up your state, and it'll tell you what the religious complexion is, how many Protestants there are, how many evangelical conservatives are among those Protestants, how many liberals, how many Jews, et cetera, pretty typical stuff. But that you can also go into the data and you can get to the county level, and you can do this for any county any region in the whole of the United States. And the crosstab of identity is mixed up with, there's another group of things you can look for. You can see how many people oppose abortion and what, Catholics think about gay rights in this particular. I mean, it's really detailed, and it's about religious identity, and it's about your political views. Well, what the Youngkin campaign did, evidently, is that they used public religion data, to the data on that county level, to go and identify counties in Virginia with large percentages of white evangelicals, and then who they knew were people who would agree with their policies, and who they also knew would be like, really upset about CRT, critical race theory, and really, be mad at the public schools and all the things that evangelicals are mad about the courts. And so what they did then is, so they found these counties where there were the largest percentages of white evangelicals in Virginia. And they cross-tabbed those with voter lists. And that by doing that, they discovered how many white evangelicals weren't registered across this, or hadn't voted in recent elections across Virginia. And they went and they targeted their entire campaign to those missing white evangelical voters. And so they did it through that data search. They did it by concentrating their campaign in those parts of Virginia, which are mostly, and I keep, if you're watching me online, you can see I'm pressing my hands down or sort of pushing them to one side. And that's because they mostly did it in the South and in the West of Virginia. So, and not only did they do it by targeting the candidates going out there, they took the most offensive two candidates, which was the lieutenant governor candidate, Winsome Sears, and the attorney general candidate, Jason Maoris, both of whom won. And they sent them to these really, far distant counties with all these white evangelicals, and had them, rev up the troops. And they also identified networks of churches. And they went through these, and this was a story that was on Get Religion. They actually were able to track the movement of the Youngkin campaign through this network of mostly charismatic churches in the South and the West of Virginia. And so basically, Glenn, and when the election happened, the liberal, more blue Virginia and bluish purple Virginia people voted in as high a number as we have been over the last dozen years, which has basically, turned Virginia blue on most of the maps of recent elections. But they found about 30,000 voters. And, they're real people, and they're really alive. I suppose if we wanted to, we could be screaming, they cheated, or what have you. They invented these people, they invented these voters, but they found them, and they went out and they got them to the polls, and they just got more numbers. And apparently there are enough white evangelicals in remote places in Virginia where you can outvote Fairfax County and Richmond City and Newport News, Virginia, the places where there's a lot more diversity, a lot more Black people, a lot more, highly educated women, and all those sorts of things that usually vote for Democrats. And so now we have this governor. So who is the next generation of Donald Trump. I mean, unbelievable, the stuff that's happening this week.
So before I get to what he's done, if you weren't in Virginia and during this election, hypothetically, maybe you're in Scotland, what were the dials that were being turned? Because I think the dominant news version of this is how essentially like the anti-Trump Republicans now got popular on social media because they're anti-Trump Republicans meet up with the corporate Democrats. Now, Grant, if for those of you that don't know, Tripp's on the very left side if he's a Democrat. So this is my version of this story. They all have blamed this whole thing on like Biden being edgy, which I've yet to meet any of my leftist friends that will like call themselves a Democrat to be like, that's what I'm talking about, Biden. So I'm always like, I'm waiting for him to be the socialist boogeyman that was complained about. So when that event happened, from the outside, just listening to podcasts on, of political podcasts of MSNBC, CNN, and then my leftist ones, what the dominant story was, Biden went too far, and this is like a rejection of it, and that kind of thing. And in my head, I'm like, went too far with what? But that's how it got played, and no one's mentioned the religious angle or a giant new turnout of new voters. So if you were in there watching the news ads, right, like that goes on your TV and shows up in your social media feed and stuff, when they realize they're this unactivated group, like what issue dials were being turned up? Because I think that's revelatory to the state of religion in those diverse urban contexts as to what animates someone to get off their seat and vote when they haven't.
Yeah, and the only way that I think Biden played into the Virginia election is that the people who are the most progressive, the further left of the electorate, was just so discouraged coming into the election. It was really hard to get out, for example, younger adult voters because they felt like they had voted for president. And it's always hard to get them to vote in more local elections anyway. But then, there's this constant drone from the news about what Biden hasn't done. They're still paying their college loans, but what's going on? What's going on with voting rights?
That the Atlantic article that like multiple constitutional scholars went through, like he has the executive ability to do a whole list of things he said he was going to do, and he hadn't done it, and no one's stopping him. Like that, like those things, like forgiving student loans. Let me just tell you what the turnout would be, knowing 30 or 40 people in Virginia who have a shit ton of student loans. Oops, I didn't know if we agreed if we were cursing. So a ton of student loans, like it's a real basic thing. If you think of how many military and recently retired military in Virginia have student loans because of just like predatory means, and you forget and then he comes up, well, let me come with a number, and then he doesn't do anything. That's when you go, so I completely get that part, but and that so doesn't that make a whole bunch of people get off their seats because they use religion data.
Yeah, so there was a Biden factor, and the Biden factor was mostly, I think, to de-energize or kind of deflate the more liberal edge, who had very high expectations of what they thought Biden was going to do. So that was part of it. But the other piece was, oh my gosh, the red button issues that the Youngkin people pushed to motivate the evangelicals. I mean, that was stunning to watch. One had to do with transgender people. There was a case in Loudoun County where they literally found what's probably the one case of a transgender sexual assault in a bathroom. And what it was, apparently, this is all alleged, it's all in the courts right now, but they're two teenagers at a school, and they used to have a relationship. One is a biological girl. The other one is transgender, I think, transgender woman, right? Transgender girl. And so they met up in the bathroom because they used to always meet up in the bathroom to have a tryst. And in this particular case, the cis girl didn't want the trans girl to be part of this, sort of sexual encounter anymore. but it happened anyway. And so then the one girl, she starts saying that she was attacked. She was sexually assaulted in this bathroom, and the people turned it into this. See, we told you if you allow trans kids to use the bathroom, somebody's going to get raped. And what happened was the school tried to keep it kind of quiet because they wanted to work through it, you know, minors and all this kind of stuff. And the county, the lawyer for the county, there's a name for it we have in Virginia, the state's attorney or the county attorney, whatever it is, didn't press charges. Well, as soon as that case leaked out, it became all about trans people in bathrooms all the time, and terrified parents that their kids were going to get raped in the bathrooms. And look, we really have a case of it here in Loudoun County, and oh my gosh, it's going to be terrible. So that became unbelievably vile, and
like the story became ammo in the area. Like, so if you were in the broadcasting area, the ads were on that. And it was, the other issue was like his critical race theory stuff. Is that the other one was the schools are teaching critical race theory, and your kids are being brainwashed, and white kids are being taught to hate themselves. And there was, again, this was one of the smartest campaigns I ever saw. And really, people have got to pay attention to this. You saw some of it on television, but where you really saw it was on the platform next door. Because what happened was these nice, quote unquote, white evangelicals from all over Virginia started posting all of these talking points from the Youngkin campaign was giving them about transgender bathroom problems, about critical race theory. And then they went off and they tried to identify all these different school libraries all over Virginia that had books that they did approve of. And so in the weeks leading up to the election, there was constant flow of information on Nextdoor. I'm on Nextdoor here in my little neighborhood in Fairfax County. There was all these people. Did you see this pornography in the school library? And parents were piling on it. It's like, oh my God, we got to get those books out of there. Where do these libraries? And the librarians were like under verbal assault, and people felt absolutely afraid. And then what's his face? McAuliffe, the Democratic governor, who's really kind of an establishment Democrat guy. Oh, you don't have to explain to me who he is. As a high quality Bernie bro, we aren't fans of him. Like, I mean, he's like Dick Cheney without the war criminal. That's there
you
kind
go,
of
enemy of the people.
Yeah. Just trying to perform my my concentrated version of my location.
There you go. So anyway, but he walked right into it, because one of the questions in the debate was, should parents have control of the curriculum at public schools? And he said no. Which
is semi-reasonable if you're not talking to a group of people that are friends with paranoid, angry Republicans who just feel threatened by culture changing and be overly determined by Los Angeles and New York. Like,
right. It's one of those have been all amped up on Nextdoor.
Yeah.
As if it's a real grassroots thing.
Yeah.
But certainly something I noticed as I went through Nextdoor and identified all the different neighborhoods is the complaints were all exactly the same. And so it was never grassroots. They tested messaging on Nextdoor. They shared messaging on Nextdoor. They made it look like it was coming from just your regular neighbors who were so concerned with the safety of their children. And it was all just stuff. But That's it. That's where you're going to see it. You're going to see what looks like a very kind of organic grassroots kind of pro parents movement.
Mm-hmm.
And that speaks, of course, really, really loudly to the concerns from the old religious right, the white evangelical parents who are, afraid of losing their religion, control of their children, and all those other sorts of things. So it was incredibly well orchestrated.
Oh yeah.
Well funded, and really used data that had been developed mostly by people who are progressive religious types.
Yeah, I know. The idea that like things you and Robbie Jones thought of are getting
I know
utilized.
things that I thought of because I used to be on the board of the PRI, and Robbie Jones, who writes, The End of White Christian America and White Too Long, and so using data sets developed by people with interests like that.
His sequel's going to be White Still Wrong, and it's like. So
the end of white Christian data collection is what the next book might be. So it's like, oh my gosh. So yeah, it was really incredible to watch, and the whole way along, I was just beside myself, and I finally started writing about it. And when I wrote about how Youngkin was manipulating religion, and I was trying to write about it from the perspective of what was visible and not just sounding like I was being paranoid. People started saying, "Oh, that's not correct." He's a really great Christian guy. He just he loves Jesus. And I'm going, this is bad, and we're gonna see it quick.
Okay, so the next thing I'm gonna ask you is, I don't know, your top 3 things that's happened since he became governor. Hadn't been that long, that makes you go, especially for those of us that didn't know this backstory about how religion was manipulated. Like, this is what happens when it gets harnessed using big data, paranoia for turnout. And then here's what happens when they get in charge, right? Like, I want to ask you for that top 3.
Yeah, I can do that quickly.
I know, but think about it, because all those neighborhood apps, this is my aside why you think of your 3 things. I was on them at the beginning of lockdown here in Scotland, and then I found out that Scottish people get quiet once the sun goes down, which means for 6 months they get quiet at 4 p.m. I don't want, in living in a small house, to go to bed that early, or to get my 3 children to go inside a very small house and be quiet. So I bought some Bluetooth lights. They follow the beats of the music and shoot little laser shows around. They weren't that expensive, and I set 3 or 4 of them up in the backyard, get a Bluetooth speaker, and we had dance parties for an hour every night. Neighborhood app.
Oh no.
Loves to comment on the Fuller family dance parties. Occasionally creepy pictures show up on it. All of which are like me and Elgin. This is how it works. Elgin, our oldest, he like kind of participates, but is like, and judges. Cora and Haven, they're very committed. Not as committed as their father, who is just like going, I moved to Scotland. I have no friends. I'm in the backyard. It's a lockdown. Whatever. I may have day drank and started dancing. And then they post pictures. And then it became a thing. Like, are the Fullers going to have a dance thing tonight? Well, then once the music starts, and it starts coming when it's in the dark times, because when it's light outside, everyone's out till midnight, because in the summers, the sun just stays up. Well, that's when I stopped following the neighborhood app, because I realized that the mascot of the neighborhood was whether or not Cora and Haven had talked me into having a dance party. See, that's what happened in Scotland. It was not animating me to go vote for anyone, which in Scotland they let employed immigrants vote. I know that sounds anti-American, but since you're paying taxes,
try to do that here.
Yeah, I just want to be like, I've paid as much taxes in 3 years here as I paid in 15 years in America. But so that's what when you start talking about those apps, I always just think my neighborhood's app is wondering why there's so much noise coming from one place. Like, oh, it's the Americans. They're from Los Angeles. They just like dancing a lot. Things like that. That's what comes up. And then you'll just see it. One of them works at the university. He does like religion, but he's dancing like well, what religion is he? He's not Protestant, is he? You know, they're just like, we haven't met a Protestant minister that dances in the evening with his kids in the back. Anyway, that's what I meant. So 3 things. So since he showed up, what are 3 things no one knew they were saying yes to when they got actualized on their neighborhood apps and strategic organization?
Number 1.
All right.
Andrew Wheeler, Trump's EPA director, was nominated to be the director of natural resources in Virginia. And so, in other words, we're going from the guy who we just kicked out of the EPA, making to be the guy in charge of everything to do with mining, coal and oil, water resources, etc., in the state of Virginia. And they are already busily rolling back every single environmental protection that they possibly can, even though he's not even confirmed yet. So that happened like on the first day. Number 2, Jason Miyares, who is the first ever Latino attorney general of the state of Virginia. I think he's actually the first ever Latino elected to a major statewide office. He goes to a charismatic Episcopal church in southeastern Virginia Beach, I think. And it's a real, it probably is the most sort of fundamentalist type Episcopal church in the whole state of Virginia. So anyway, Jason Miyares, and he was one of the ones who did this, collection. He went of these churches. He helped to organize that and also helped to swing some evangelical Latino and Latina voters towards the Republicans. So anyway, what he has done is on his first day in office, he fired the entire board that was over parole issues in Virginia. And so now the board that was examining convictions and releases and all these different cases about parole and death penalty cases, which we don't have the death penalty anymore, but there was a lot of stuff that needed to be worked through, about life sentencing for people and, on and on and on. He just dismissed them all. I mean, just literally sent them all packing. And so we have no idea what he's going to put in place in terms of criminal justice issues, which was being reformed in the state of Virginia. And then this is the worst, is that Glenn Youngkin has announced, and they have set up a tip line where parents can send an email and report anything that happens to their children in school that they find disturbing or upsetting. So the state of Virginia now has a snitch line for parents to report any violations. Oh, he outlawed critical race theory on day 1 by executive order. We expected that. He said he was going to do that. But we didn't expect a snitch line related to CRT, where literally if a teacher says something like, "Oh, today is Holocaust Remembrance Day," and there's a kid with Nazi parents sitting in the class, and the kid says, "There's no such thing as a Holocaust," and the teacher says, "Oh, yes, there is a Holocaust." That kid can go home, tell his parents what happened in school, and the parent can snitch on the teacher.
Yeah.
And they're working, of course, to set up all kinds of new things. And so Glenn Youngkin's response was, "Oh, we're just gathering data so that we can figure out what the appropriate response to these kinds of violations will be." Yeah.
I mean, snitch lines, they've been a real effective tool in preserving the freedom of speech and democracy across the world.
And they're geared towards teachers. They're really, truly geared towards.
I mean, given how much money they're paid, they should really figure out how to keep the bottom line. Like when you become a teacher, it's probably because you have a deep agenda and you're wanting to corrupt large numbers of kids. As someone with a large number of public school teachers in their family, some of whom retired because of the treatment coming from right-wing parents after this. All right, I won't name the person. Here's a very true story of a family member who is a supervisor in the school. The art teacher is reprimanded because they do the story, like you learn a type of art, and then you have an artist that does that type of art, and you learn their story, and then you learn the background, how they do this type of art. So let's say, I don't know, there are 20 artists over the years, over the school year you focus on. You learn different art techniques as you're doing it. Mm-hmm. If you were corrupted by critical race theory, how many of them would have to not be Anglo? Well, if the answer is 2 or more, then you understand the situation. So the artist who painted the Obama's official portraits, right, was one of the artists. So the first African-American artist to paint the first African-American first family to have their portraits. And then they also have a particular style that the Obamas selected.
Yeah, it's a really interesting style, one that I think would appeal to little kids in an art class.
Exactly. So let's imagine you were a public school teacher in the United States of America, and you had an African-American first family and the first artist to do it, and you're introducing different art styles. And I don't know, 10% of the class includes weeks that you focus on artists and backgrounds that are African-American. Well, actually, the other person of color wasn't an American. It was older than America. But nonetheless, let's say, imagine that's the case. And then you get multiple emails from children that feel just harmed and threatened, that you're judging their whole family and blah, 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 blah. Like, this is the world that, like, gives birth to. And it can't be one we choose. And then I wonder, like, what's if that's your MO, it's already includes you internalizing a judgment towards a large amount of the population that it's just not built for democracy. And I mean, I'm always worried I'm going to end up doing the same for the other side. But, like, if you're a public school teacher, this is not like being a minister at a really large church that has to figure out how to be a purple church, and you get all the perks that come along with 6-digit salary and multiple staff members, all that. You're making art lessons, and then you're giving a hard time. And that I know tons of people have had that experience, and I just don't. I don't know what to do with that. It's really
Well, a friend of mine who's been working for years and years, Julie Ingersoll. We've talked. I think I brought her up before. Oh, yes, we were on together with you.
Yeah, during our first time we did a class together.
Yeah, Julie has worked on Christian Reconstruction. That really, sort of the people who want to replace the Constitution with biblical law. So it's a pretty extremist form of the religious right. But part of their long-standing work in that quadrant of Christian ethics, quote unquote, is to undermine public schools. And this is a particularly devious approach to that, because what it's doing is, one, there's an overt attempt to control curriculum, but 2, good people who have just been doing their jobs, teaching art or teaching history or trying to teach, what do you do when you have a classroom that's like 1/4 Black and, maybe half of the kids are white and the other half or other quarter are Hispanic, which was pretty much my daughter's high school in our part of the county. You want to include everybody. You want to make sure everybody has a sense of history and that their cultures are cared about, and that, students can learn to appreciate one another and they can cooperate together in a democracy. All the good stuff that you're supposed to do in civics and creating the common good and helping people to be able to love their neighbor as theirself, and all the kind of thing that public education is supposed to help to provide for. If you've been doing that and all of a sudden there's a tip line for turning in teachers who are teaching divisive or disorienting or disturbing material, you're just going to quit. I mean, so it's a really interesting, and the only new teachers who will come in are the teachers who agree with it. So it's actually a really sneaky way of undoing the education system. You know, it's like you attack it on one level that's very public, and, you know, you kind of get people to you can get people to talk about it. But usually what happens then is people just say, oh, I hate critical race theory, or you've made an issue out of something that wasn't an issue before. But then underneath, you're basically weeding out all of the people who have been doing the job. Mm-hmm. And you're opening up space for people to come in who will basically be the foot soldiers of the new sort of way of thinking. And so my friend Julie, the reason I brought her up is not only does she study this, she knows that that's one of the strategies. And she teaches at a university in a state that's doing a very similar thing. And, you know, basically that's happening on every level, from the public schools through the public universities. And we're seeing an incredible amount of retirements of university professors right now who just don't, you know, they're in their 50s and 60s. They've been teaching forever. There are people who know how to teach civil rights and know how to handle a classroom with diverse students and all these sorts of things. Very skilled professional experts. And they just like, you know, if the governor is going to turn me in and there's going to be some sort of inquisition on a McCarthy scale, which is basically what's going to happen here, I just don't want to be part of it. I'm just going to take my retirement and run.
So I want to give you, because my timer went off already, but I want to give you.
I'm sorry. This is a really important topic.
I know it
obviously.
is. I know it is.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you one question, but then I'll give you three options for the last topic, and then you can pick whichever one that you're like, you know. I was going to say loaded for bear, but, you know, I don't know. So here's a question that comes to my mind that I'm conscious of, because I've spent a lot of time in very progressive religious context and the academy. I wonder what to do with feelings of those on the other side that think the institutions you have power for, like your deep commitments, get reinforced in a similar way. And so public education is a battle about which side can organize to enforce their cultural normativity on. Because, I mean, I've been in lots of meetings in the academy in America and in the UK, and know that if you don't agree with certain commitments, that it definitely are much more right of center friends and neighbors will see as part of, you know, scare quote left type of things, you get silence, nuance, and move around it. And that there's an increasing, especially in the academy and in progressive churches, like, can you jump through these hoops before we let you in, be it to be a minister at our church, or like to be able to teach an entry level on faculty. Like now, most schools will require you to write something that's going to get assessed on your diversity and inclusion statement. And a lot of churches will do similar things. And this is like churches a lot smaller, but if I was on the other side, I feel like I would go, yeah, we're doing the same thing you're doing. And that's when I always wonder, I have this like self-doubt, like, is there, because I've been a minister at a very purple church and was like, everyone knew it was socialist Tripp. And I always wonder, like, how as people of faith do we both have our deep convictions and not cooperate when the movement of power is one that functions coercively towards others' conscience? Because if it was religious conscience, I mean, now I'm like a liberal Baptist, so it's not surprising. Like Roger Williams is my homeboy kind of movement. You know, like I want everyone to have permission. You sound
like somebody I've heard of before.
Yeah. So I mean, does that make sense? Like I want to be I want to hold my convictions deeply. I also don't think, like, say, a religion program is improved by everyone either believing or signaling that Hillary Rodham Clinton's a bit too conservative for them. Like, does that make sense? Like, I don't want that, even though I believe that deeply. It's an awkward question. It's
well, you're still here talking to me, and I like Hillary.
I voted for Hillary.
I know you did. You were quite you were good about it too.
I know. I didn't say a lot of things I thought of.
Yeah, I know.
And honestly, I'll say that if Biden nominated her to the Supreme Court just to troll Republicans, I would laugh about it. I might not tweet about it, but I would laugh about it because that'd be funny.
It would be funny. Well, some of us are getting too old to take those jobs, but there's my ageism of myself. So, one of the things I think that is a problem is that, and this is not like it's both sides. I don't believe in both sidesism. It's just silly. But if we're going to talk about progressive Christians and the news, one of the things I think that progressive Christians have to really do. I mean, I'm talking to me. I'm talking to our own people here. Is the virtue signaling stuff has just got to stop. I mean, it's really we sometimes have made a stereotype of ourselves, and that's the thing. I mean, the Glenn Youngkin people, they manipulated that perfectly in this last election. But, we gave them some ammo, and that becomes our problem. Is how do we talk about these things? How do we try to actually convince people rather than just police people? And that's a whole different sort of social vision, I think, of how we function in democracy. And right now, I think that, people police me on Twitter sometimes. And I have to say, I don't like it, when it happens. And I don't need policing. Ask me a question. Ask me why I said something in a particular way, or what, kind of where my heart is about XYZ issue, or what have you. But we cannot afford to be stereotypes of ourselves right now. We have to be people with genuine vision, genuine heart, and the ability to really put into action the things that we hold dear about, loving our neighbor as ourselves, or putting people around a bigger table, or however we want to put that. But I'm trying to hold myself accountable to that.
Yeah,
and I think it's harder work.
Oh yeah, I think it's hard work. But I'm going to let you pick a last thing to talk about. Otherwise, we derail on virtue signaling, cancel culture, and all that kind of stuff. That'd have to be a separate topic altogether.
Yeah.
All right. So, do you want to talk about Jerry Falwell's piece in Vanity Fair?
Oh my gosh. Somebody wants to know if it's a happy hour yet. I think if we talk about Jerry Falwell's article, it will be. That's terrible. I'm sorry.
No,
that's a stereotype of myself.
No, I'm going to get some black water if we're going to talk about Jerry Falwell. So Jerry Falwell.
Okay, what are the other two?
Okay,
what are the other two? Just real quick.
That Christianity Today article on God's pronouns, which is a theological train wreck, or the how progressive Christians engage in the public conversation around mask and vaccine. What triggered it from a homebrew member that suggested it was Barry Weiss on Bill Maher's, like, the bureaucratic response is a catastrophic moral failure. And then the New York Times picked it up right in the last couple of days and has talked about it, which I've been told by my evangelical friends that there are two sacred texts for liberal Protestants, and it's the New York Times and the Bible in that order.
Yeah.
So we got mass vaccine stuff framed by the bit on, Bill Maher, Barry Weiss bit, or we got God's pronouns piece from Christianity Today, or Jerry Falwell Jr. And oh my, what a train. Those three are all gold, but next month when we do this, they won't all be fresh. Maybe the mask and vaccine thing will, but which one makes you say, Tripp, hold my dark water? I have I have a hot take.
Oh my gosh. I don't know that I have a hot take on any of those, except that they're all just like train wrecks.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my hot take. What a mess. Oh golly. Jerry Falwell is easy. Oh, I don't know. Which one do you want to talk about? I don't care.
Well, okay.
The Barry Weiss one is interesting.
Okay, let's do that. I'll try to make it as problematic as possible, and then you say whatever you want.
Oh no. Okay. We're back to the graduate school thing again.
No. Okay. So for those that don't know, I mean, it was like one of the most tweeted things. In the last week, the two biggest like tweeted video moments was Barry Weiss on Bill Maher's podcast being asked about vaccines and stuff. Not his podcast, his show on HBO, but I listened to it as a podcast. And she said that, look, this is me saying what she said, but repeating it. Something like, the bureaucratic response to the COVID pandemic at this point is a catastrophic moral crime, and that there's a growing awareness that the way our bureaucracy is functioned is just nuts. That you have like the panic fear of a small minority driving the influence of a larger group, and it's causing lots of damage. Then she lists off stuff, half of which is just factually wrong and half of which is accurate, which makes someone that's watching be slightly uncomfortable. Like she's like, cloth masks do nothing. And you're like, actually, that's not the case. Even with Omicron, it does make 15 minutes of interaction much more safe. But, science is science. And I don't know. I personally spend a lot of time caring about that. But when it goes to the data on the effects of children, and particularly poor working class children on continued online school and masking in school, given the more kids will die of drowning in a hot tub this year than of COVID. You get why that because of what started and how it's changed over time. Then it goes through the American binary tribal filter. It just gets really ugly, and then each tribe, it's like, what percentage of it has to change for you to acknowledge it and do something different? Governors are switching first, right, that are Democrats, and then the Republican governors that went crazy are dialing back. So governors are trying to move to the middle, and then the president's trying to deal with stuff, and then you have all the unions of the teacher unions in different cities are doing different things, and you get where the animosity comes from.
Right.
And then you also, if you're a minister, which we both talked to lots of them, you also know the consequences of this. And there are huge chunks of the population haven't done basic love your neighbor type of material. So then you get to this point where the growing number of people, and I think she's accurate about young people. I interact with a lot of them at the University of Edinburgh. The animosity I get is high, and I'm not even in charge of what happens. And just knowing, even from people that have been in some of the homebrew classes, who's kids, college kids and stuff, are why are we still doing this? This is nuts, blah, 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 blah. I get she's trying to raise a particular point, and it included some things that are just factually wrong. But I do think it points out something that's really hard for us as progressive Christians, is to differentiate how we process a public question from our tribal allegiance that isn't to the living and life-giving God who desires justice and flourishing, but to the political tribe that's like, I ain't giving no Trumpsters a win. Homeboy just decided that boosters are cool and he got booed. Why would I ever do anything they want to do? And I completely agree with that. In fact, I was disappointed. He got a booster.
Who, Trump?
Yes.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, like, you know when Jesus is like, pray for your enemies? Like, and I'm like, that's unreasonable, Tripp. Why are you acting this way? I don't want it to feel like I was performing the question mostly because I've told you, you're like my honorary mama. I need help. My pastoral care skills here are really deteriorating. I just am like, he shouldn't have got his booster and he should have died. And then I'm like, Tripp, you shouldn't say that. You shouldn't say that. But
I confess, I have said that in private. You know, and now I just said it to you on the internet.
You just said it to me.
But I haven't said it recently. So, no, you know, I heard that thing from Barry Weiss. And the first thing I thought about when I heard it was, it's just, we haven't told the story very well. My daughter was diagnosed yesterday with COVID. Okay. And she has been great. She's 24 years old. She's been great this whole pandemic. She's worn masks. She's kept her parents safe. She's worked to keep her friends safe. She's given things up, and she got vaccinated and boosted. She's done absolutely everything. And this week, 2 years out, she got COVID. She's in her apartment right now by herself, isolated in a little teeny tiny room with cans of orange juice and, all kinds of other stuff to just kind of keep her afloat for the next 5 days. And so, I think about her. And one of the things that she said to me was, she said, I did everything right, and I still got it anyway. And then I said, well, how does that make you feel? And she said, well, it doesn't make me feel bad that I've done everything right. She said, I just can't believe I got this so close to what I hope will be the end. And so the way she said it all made me really just kind of go back to the Barry Weiss thing. And we have allowed this to be about, partisanship and all this kind of thing. All I can think is, how many more people would be dead if we weren't vaccinated? Even if it's only, in the United States, whatever it is, 65% of us who are fully vaccinated and 45% are vaxxed and boosted. It's if my daughter hadn't done everything right to this point, when she finally did get COVID, I might be taking her to the hospital right now. She might be laying in some emergency room somewhere or on a ventilator. And see, that's the point. It's not the point is that we still have to wear masks, or that the government messed it up, or that science is hard to follow and it's just too difficult, and that bureaucrats are nuts and all those kinds of things. That's not the point. The point is, we've never been through this before. And many of us have done the very best we could possibly do. And in doing that, I think we have kept millions and millions and millions of people alive, even people we don't like Donald Trump, and that is good. Mm-hmm. And in fact, this has been a good response, that there weren't more people that we had to bury, that there weren't more people who will never, work again in jobs they loved. There's been incredible amount of grief. There's been incredible amount of loss, but this could have been so much worse. And the reason it's not worse is because folks like, us, just regular people, took it seriously enough and did what we could and followed the best advice we could possibly, hear, get a hold of, take seriously. And we've kept it from being even worse.
Yeah.
So that to me is a better story to tell about right now, rather than me screaming at Barry Weiss, what a, freaking idiot you are. Sorry, you're done with COVID. Yeah, it was so privileged. It made me insane. But, I'm sorry you feel so bad about it. But the truth is because she did stuff along the way, she made it better. And so that's, I think we need some new stories to tell about this moment. And we just have really bad politicians. Nobody has a narrative imagination.
Yeah.
I think that really kind of hooks into this time to allow us to step into a new space. And that's what we need to do with this. We need to be able to step somehow into a new space and see what we've been through with more interestingly enough, more gratitude. If
have
we're
you
here,
thought about writing a book about that?
about gratitude?
Yeah. It's important.
Yeah, maybe I should. Oh, look, there's one on my shelf. Yeah. But with more gratitude, with more generosity towards one another, with I think a deeper awareness of what we didn't lose. And part of it is I watched that horrible. I don't know if you've watched it yet or not. What's it called? Station 11 on HBO, which is a post-pandemic thing.
I saw about 10 minutes.
Watch it.
Yeah. I tapped out. I was like, nah, I think I'm just going to watch some more Boba Fett.
Yeah. I went back to, watching murder shows, which was like so much better than watching their pandemic take. And I literally couldn't watch it because it was, and the reason why is because it's about a pandemic that is so much worse.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there and watching the first 10, 15, 20 minutes of it. And I thought to myself, oh my God, we are so lucky. We are so lucky. We are so lucky. and then I thought, I can't watch this, but that's really kind of what we need right now as a dose of, we could have all been dropping dead in the middle of streets,
So, okay. We're 8 minutes over our end time.
Okay.
So I the one thing I thought of, like if I was trying to help people reframe it, would be something like, while we're having our partisan fights here, we do realize that as the West and the privileged people in the West, we did deliberately choose to preserve patents that will cost the lives of millions of our brothers and sisters across the world. Like the consequences of not distributing vaccines in all the places that could have received them if we weren't worried about profit motives is significant. And the numbers there are much higher than, like, it's just a bit dumbfounding. This is not what we were, as a species, were better at a previous pandemic at working across our nation state boundaries. And so while we're reflecting on how tribalism is functioning in intense ways in our age internally, the way the market hides our tribalism globally and doesn't become objects of debate, it is significant. Because if you take the three manufacturers of our vaccines and look at their contributions, you could not tell which party they like more. But we do know both parties work together to preserve the profit-making motive for the distribution of vaccines. And that's like one of those questions, thinking about, spending, this semester, both teaching and reading, doing a lot of engaging in liberation theology, that John Sobrino, Gustavo Gutierrez both bring this up, that so often the church in the West comes up with questions it loses sleep over without recognizing all the bodies put on crosses in the present. And when we animate ourselves and then forget these other things, because I imagine that there are tons of congregations that are going to get split over a masking fight that would have a lot more unity at providing medical aid globally. And I wonder, and I'm deeply suspicious, but like, as to why the church hasn't unified around that, short of like Pope Francis tweeting about it, The World Council of Churches has yet to make ethical demands on the denominations that its members advocate for releasing profit connections to and I don't, maybe everyone doesn't know this, but like a lot of the science behind it was stuff taxpayers paid for in partnership with these companies that then they privatize it. And I just think it's important to note that I don't even know what solutions are to that. I just know that so often we get sidetracked and don't realize that there's collateral damage when we make our debates more and more colloquial when we live in a very global world.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredibly significant. And, just there's a couple of brighter spots there. One is that big project that Peter Hotez and the university, I think it's the University of Texas, is involved in with free vaccines. And that whole, that's doing some extraordinary work right now. And I think that they're moving ahead with such speed to try to get countries that had not been vaccinated. And there's another piece of it that is a lot less widely known, is that there are some government agencies. A friend of mine who's a world-class epidemiologist, works for one, that have been trying to get vaccines into different parts of the world. And I was talking to my friend, and she had been on the phone with something like 16 different countries the day that I was on a call with her. And one of the things that's happening globally is that she had vaccine that had basically been paid for by some huge anonymous donors. So yes, it is still profitized. Yes, it is still got the patents on it, but it's also free because these big global, super rich people have decided that they're going to invest a whole lot of money into distributing these vaccines around the world. And it's part of her job to get those vaccines in people's hands. And guess what's happened is that other countries have been radicalized by the same kinds of disinformation that we've been radicalized with. And she's been working with these countries and trying to give this vaccine to them. And a lot of it, she said, Diana, it just is incredibly maddening. She said, the higher the percentage of Christians in the nation is, the more they believe that the vaccines are some evil plot to destroy them. She said it's much easier to get this vaccine into the hands of Muslim countries than it is into Christian countries. And it's like, she said, I don't even know what to do with that. And I said, oh my gosh, that is just shocking to me. So there's the profit motive. There is indeed what you're saying, our blindness towards these global things, but we also live in a global information system that is creating this chaos of what truth is and what science is and how these things work along religious lines that isn't just impacting us. It's also impacting other countries around the world too, that are beginning to have similar responses, very high anti-vax movements in countries that desperately need vaccine, where vaccine is actually available to them. This is a really, painful, and complex, sort of moment in those ways. And I think that somehow, I was shocked when she told me her story. I thought that we were doing nothing with the vaccines, but she's actually trying. It's her work, and she's running into this wall of these, sort of global anti-vax people who are saying, "Don't take it, don't take it, don't take it."
Yeah,
and so that's a problem too. And these are difficult times. There's no doubt about that. But it might have been more fun to talk about Jerry Falwell.
Well, it might have been, but then we would have had to get out the black water. We would have discovered that he basically learned how to be a religious drifter from his dad, but never really took much of it seriously. Franklin Graham's trying to steal liberty and stuff from him, and then you want to know who was the real culprit?
The mom.
Yeah. He's like, you want to know who was terrorizing my father and me? My mom.
Yeah. Jerry Falwell Jr. blames his mother for his sexual problems. It's like, this is the oldest story in the book, boys. Blame mom. Oh, that's probably what happened with Cain. It was my mom.
You did it.
She was the problem with me and my dad.
When he says in the interview that my mother's the only reason my dad became puritanical, I always just wonder, could you say that with a straight face to all the people who have horrible lives because of your father? Look, I know, but it was my mom's fault. You just wonder that it's a. But okay, at the end of that article, when he said, Franklin Graham basically is trying to get the move in on liberty because he wished that his dad had a college, and Franklin Graham's like, you'll never be a part of the evangelical blah 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 again. What he really meant was grift, and Jerry was like, nothing in history has done more to turn people away from Christianity than organized religion. The religious evangelical elite has got this idea that somehow their sins aren't as bad as everyone else's. And I'm sitting there going no shit. No shit, Jerry Falwell Jr. I'm like, really? You think so? You think so? The member of DC Talk the only one that talks to me, who went to Liberty, was just like, when that whole thing went down, and this is on the podcast, if you on Homebrewed, when Kevin from DC Talk was on there, his comments, when that whole Blackwater thing came out and stuff, are hilarious. He's just makes the observation, he's like, Tripp, this is the thing everyone that's big in evangelicalism knows, that about a third of them, usually the most successful ones, are completely playing it like it's chess. And then once you realize that's what they're doing, you're already so much into it, you have to decide what to do with it. Right?
Yeah.
But that Falwell says this thing's one thing, but that he also is Franklin Graham's doing this, blah, 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 too. And it is another. Since 2016, so many of my sweeping, deep, dark, I thought inappropriate judgments towards evangelical leaders have seemed tame in retrospect.
Well, finding out that Jerry Falwell Sr. was getting drunk off of NyQuil, that was
it?
A
he
little
called
wild too in that article.
I actually pulled it. He calls it Baptist wine.
Yep.
Falwell said, because of my last name, people think I'm a religious person, but I'm not. My goal was to make them realize I was not my dad. And then he goes into this whole thing about how he liked drinking, but his dad didn't drink because of his mother. But occasionally I'd find him passed out with, quote, Baptist wine because he just drank a whole bottle of NyQuil.
Yep.
What?
Really, have yourself a nice Lagavulin and just, clock it in.
Yeah. I think we're all looking forward to Jerry Falwell Jr. being a consultant on season 3 of Righteous Gemstones.
Oh my gosh. I thought the best tweet was Mason Menega retweeted himself from about a year ago when he said that he couldn't wait for Jerry Falwell's post-evangelical memoir. And there it is. We got the beginning of it in Vanity Fair. Jerry Falwell Jr. saying how he never really believed any of it anyway, and it was all his mom's fault. And then his dad is passed out on the couch from NyQuil.
Yeah, and I just want to say to everyone, as someone who is very committed to not drinking NyQuil for alcoholic purpose, it's actually not a smart decision. Just if you believe in science, the other chemicals related to it, if you're getting drunk on NyQuil, there are other things that cause significant issues for your liver. It would be better for you to have a very strong, or just you could do a rum and Coke. I mean, you could do a lot of things.
For goodness sake.
Yeah. And then you could call it medicine. Like a hot toddy is not like it's the other things in NyQuil that are problematic. So get your honey, get your tea, get your whiskey. And if you want to put it in an old NyQuil bottle and drink it so it doesn't ruin your witness.
Then it's all cool.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad we could ruin our witness together, Diana. This has been a lot of fun. I'm going to hit a button just in celebration, but I don't know what it's going to do. Oh,
it's a little disco-y. Kind of got that 70s vibe going there.
Yeah. Let's see what that. Oh, that's Richard calling saying it's time for dinner. And it's 11:40 here, so it's time for me to go to sleep. But this has been a blast. Thank you all for hanging out live. Those of you that signed up are members of either the Homebrewed community or are part of Diana's Cottage group. We will send the video and audio and everything to you, but also request input topics and stuff in the future. I've set up a little thing where if you have questions, you can send them in audio and then we'll play them and talk back to you if it works, because it's always fun to have other people's voices without throwing you up on a screen and us not knowing what you're going to say without a call screener, because I've got enough angry emails from people. I'm sure you've received this before, Diana. Emails from people that volunteer their opinion on the idea that bring them on live.
No, that never happens to me.
No, it doesn't. I know. That's probably because you're a woman and the church always respects and validates woman's scholarship, leadership, and integrity. It's just all the straight white guys that get all the harassment. I know. Like, we get the worst treatment ever.
You're really persecuted.
Yeah. All day, every day. That's why I have solidarity with the crucified Lord. You know, I get occasionally angry emails. But
we know there'll be lots of stuff to talk about a month from now. I mean,
very confident.
Honestly.
But wait, the last thing we should tell them is what we're going to do over Lent. I completely forgot about this.
Oh my gosh, yeah, we're going to be together for the whole of Lent. But we promise you, it won't be quite so snarky.
No.
We're going to talk about Jesus.
It's true. It's true. If you go to JesusDeconstructed.com, it's going to be an online group over Lent. We're going to talk about, surprisingly, Jesus. You know, one of the things that brings us together, Diana?
What's that?
Well, I mean, other than Jesus, that we both wrote books about Jesus.
Yes, we did. And we both actually quoted the same passage from C.S. Lewis in both of those books.
Yeah. So if you find it obnoxious when people tell you, I don't know, Mr. Progressive Christian, what about that Lord Liar lunatic? And it drives you up a wall. That's one of the weeks in Jesus Deconstructed. If you have had a lot of different experiences with Jesus over your life, and like I've met a lot of them, and I have really baggage with his fan club, but I'm trying to figure this out. Go to JesusDeconstructed.com. If you want to, in Lent, think like I'm doing Lenty stuff, but not quit drinking or eating chocolate. But then when your friends give you a hard time for not doing it, level up and be like, no, I'm in a group online digging into Jesus. Then go JesusDeconstructed.com.
Progressives never want to talk about Jesus.
Yeah. If you don't like talking about Jesus, don't sign up. We're going to Jesus. Oh, see, I just edited myself. Look at that.
Well, we're going to Jesus the Dickens out of you.
Yeah, we're going to Jesus up out of Lent. All right. Yeah. But I'm really glad we waited until the end when everyone knew it was over to say something. Later in life, when we have a producer for this, they'll say, hey, Diana Tripp, you do know you have something coming up. You're supposed to tell them at the beginning. We want to keep it a secret. Just the elect few know first. But if you are on the elect few and you get to the website and notice a typo or something weird, let me know, because I hope they're not there. Anyway, it's been a blast. Tell Richard hi, Diana.
Oh, thanks. So, yeah, thanks for some people mentioned about my daughter being sick, and thank you for your prayers, and we really appreciate it. So far, her case seems pretty mild, and we're hoping it stays that way. Peace out, Rick.
Thank you.